How's it going, guys? My name is Zach with the Movie Castle, and today we're going to be talking about Eyes of Laura Mars from 1978. This is directed by Irvin Kershner and stars Faye Dunaway and Tommy Lee Jones, but young 1978 Tommy Lee Jones. If you guys are like me, I primarily know Tommy Lee Jones for the Men in Black movies, so really weird to see him younger and more energetic. You know, I'm used to old and serious Tommy Lee Jones, but yeah, here we get to see him be the younger male lead. Still a cop character, because, you know, he is Tommy Lee Jones. But we also get in this movie Brad Dourif. Brad Dourif, you guys probably know, especially if you're fans of my channel, you know Brad Dourif is Chucky, and it's cool to see a before they were famous Brad Dourif, and he plays one of the suspects. He's the assistant, the car driver, and you know he does a really good job at being a suspect, someone that you could totally see him being a normal guy who's got some issues, but also definitely a strong contender to be the killer, and well, especially because he would go on to be Chucky, who is definitely a killer. But really good way that he plays this part, and it's just supposed to be one of the suspects, but you really do feel for this character and understand them, and I mean, you get someone like Brad Dourif playing this part, it's way more developed, and hey, always good to see Chucky in a movie, you know, even if it's not really him. But anyway, the thing that got me to watch this movie, and why we rewatched it to do this review, is the story. The writer of this movie was John Carpenter. Well, he wrote the original script, and it got changed several times along the way, but yeah, this is written by John Carpenter. That's really great. For those of you guys who don't know, Carpenter, especially in his early career, actually did a whole bunch of writing, even for movies that he didn't direct. But really early on, after Dark Star, he wrote two scripts, Assault on Precinct 13 and The Eyes of Laura Mars. Now, Assault on Precinct 13, he kept that one and he directed it, and it became a really good, kind of underrated John Carpenter movie. If you guys have not seen Assault on Precinct 13, go check that movie out right now. It is good. Just make sure you get the original Carpenter one, you know, from the 70s. The remake's not great. But anyway, he took The Eyes of Laura Mars and he sold that one. So he sold this script, and it kind of got stuck in early development rewrites and changes, and the script got changed a bunch along the way. So this isn't pure Carpenter goodness. This started off as Carpenter goodness and then got changed and became something else. The biggest change was the killer. Carpenter originally wrote this to be a blank killer, someone you didn't know, a complete and mysterious stranger, but that didn't stick, and the studio wanted the killer to be someone from the movie, and it's a decision that you can totally see a studio making. It seems to make sense, but when John Carpenter would later say, hey, you guys wrote this concept out of my script, if you're not going to use it, I'm going to use it, and then he made Michael Myers, well, you can see that, you know, John Carpenter was right about a few things, but I definitely like the way history played out. If he had chose to direct Eyes of Laura Mars, and he had sold Assault on Precinct 13, I don't think that would have been near as good as an outcome. I mean, Assault on Precinct 13 is underrated, but a classic Carpenter movie, and that would have just turned into a B-action movie. And if we had had Carpenter getting to direct his original concept of a, you know, total stranger killer in this movie, I doubt we would have got Halloween. You know, this movie came out in the same year as Halloween, but it started production much, much earlier. But if Carpenter had made Eyes of Laura Mars instead of Assault on Precinct 13, we probably never would have got Halloween as we know it. Just imagine a Michael Myers without a Halloween mask running around New York's fashion district. That would have been a different alternate history, and I'm glad things panned out the way they wound up going. So, good decision for choosing Assault on Precinct 13, John Carpenter. Definitely, this is the script to sell if you're going to sell one. And overall, despite the development, heck that this thing went through towards the beginning of its life, it came out to be a pretty cool movie. Not the best thing ever, and it does have faults, and we'll get into those. But yeah, despite all the early trouble, it still worked out. Now, if you want to hear more about this, another YouTube channel, Good Bad Flicks, made a very good video on this movie, and if you're interested at all in the production, go check that out. But anyway, in their video, they refer to this as a disco giallo, and basically that means movies that were made around the time disco was popular. They don't necessarily have to have disco soundtracks, although I think this kind of has one or two songs in there. But movies around that time period that took influence from giallo, and you can definitely see the influence here. The point of view camera, man, the big sets. Her ex-husband in this movie is so much a giallo character. And you do get to see the influences from giallo. Obviously, Carpenter would put that in Halloween as well, and the giallo movement is a key to getting to the slasher genre, but, not as wild and crazy, and definitely not as gory as a regular Italian giallo. But anyway, this movie is good, but it definitely has some faults. Having the decision to make the killer someone we know, it's really more just reaching into your bag of characters and going, hey, how about this one? There's no real evidence early on, and the explanation is just kind of tacked on at the ending. And in fact, when they explain it, it kind of becomes this whole other different type of movie, kind of out of nowhere. And I really wish that they had worked that earlier on into the beginning, because most of the story is written where the killer is just anybody, and then it changes gear at the last minute to have it be someone, and it's just, really just one of the characters picked out, and that's not great. It's also not super scary, That's really one of the big things, is this definitely isn't a slasher movie. You can tell it's kind of from the air that would wind up being that, but we hadn't yet got Halloween, we hadn't yet got especially Friday the 13th for cool kill sequences, so the kills in this one, a lot of them are the camera running at a character, and then them going, I think one of them you do get a few stabs and falling down the stairs, but the kills aren't particularly great in this movie. And it's also one of those where it's an hour and 44 minutes-ish long, and it's one of those where you're like, how did we spend so much time? It doesn't feel like that much has happened. But overall, it's still a fine movie. It's just not a great movie. And seeing a Carpenter seed, something he started, but then he was removed from it and it changed, it's kind of like a Carpenter without Carpenter. And if you want to enjoy the movie, you kind of have to put that out of your head, like, how would Carpenter have done this? How would Carpenter have changed it? And you kind of got to not think about that if you want to just have fun with this movie, but that definitely does play in the back of your head. But let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the plot. I'm not going to be doing any major spoilers, but I do want to say my piece on a few plot points and make sure you guys have a basic understanding as to what the movie's about. We open up with this killer, and he's got a photography book, The Eyes of Mars, which has the eye picture from the cover on it, not with her on the bottom, just the eyes. And he's looking through these photographs, he's getting angry, and he's tearing them up and stabbing the cover. And then we also cut to the killer going out and murdering somebody. Now, when he murders this person, it wakes up Laura Mars, who thinks the whole thing was just a big old dream, and and she doesn't believe that the killer was really out there. But then it actually did, happen. Now, Laura Mars is a photographer. She's a high-end photographer, big art shows, people know who she is and talk about her. And she's using violence in her artwork. And this is also, her photos sometimes turn into ads, and people are like, why is violence so prevalent in society? Why is it an ad on the bus? And you can tell that Carpenter, he's literally talking about photography, but he's metaphorically talking about movies. So there's that metaphor there, kind of tenebrae there. But anyway, she gets another vision of a murder happening in an apartment not too terribly far away. She runs there, and she accidentally blurts out, it's too late, she can't save this person, but she blurts out that she saw it. And I do like how, sometimes people try to explain way too supernatural stuff to the police, and you're like, why are you telling them the truth? But I do like how in this script, Laura Mars just blurts it out without thinking, and that's the reason why. Like, she didn't literally think the police would believe her. She's just like, oh, said that. But anyway, she gets taken to the police, and she meets Tommy Lee Jones, who had showed up at her party kind of snooping her out. But she meets Tommy Lee Jones, who is this cop, and Tommy Lee Jones takes out her book and matches it to some previous crime scene photos that they had. So the crime scene photos and the photos in her book actually match up, plus she runs out and knows that this murder's happening. So you see that the psychic link was there earlier, and it's building, and it was just visions in her photography, then it was a dream, but now she can actually see through the killer's eyes. And she says, when it happens, I can't see out of my eyes, but I see in my head what the killer's seeing. So that's her visions there, but because it's first person, she can't see who the killer is, and she doesn't necessarily know these people. Now, Tommy Lee Jones and the police have kind of a hard time believing that, but at the same time, like, why would Laura Mars be killing people? So she's a person of interest, and they watch her, but they don't know if they can trust her or what exactly they believe, but something's going on there. But when Laura Mars is suddenly a big person of interest, the killer, rather than going after regular people, starts to target her and her friends. So you get to see that because, the psychic link, people know about it, the killer is coming after her, and all of her friends are in danger, and the stress gets to her. She doesn't know when she's going to get a vision. She doesn't know which of our friends will die next. So it's an interesting concept, and when we get into the specifics, that's probably it, is this movie does have a pretty good hook. There's actually quite a few psychic link horror movies, and I think this was one of the earlier ones. Movies that I've reviewed on this channel already, Fear from, I believe, 1990, and just recently I reviewed Malignant, which is a much newer psychic link horror movie. So it's a concept we've seen, but this is one of the first couple of them, and it does get you hooked. It's one person that for whatever reason is cued in to the activities of a killer, and they're like, okay, I have some clues, what can I get, what can I piece together, and it is a mystery that really does hook you, and if you like New York City horror, that actually is a whole subgenre in and of itself, New York City horror, Chud, Basket Case, Ghostbusters, there's more of it than you would think, so this also is falling into that category as well, as a cool New York City killer movie. But all that being said, the mystery is intriguing, but like I mentioned earlier, because this was originally written where it could just be anybody, which would have been cool and dark and spooky, but the fact that there is a killer when it wasn't set up means there's not near enough clues and it just kind of comes out of nowhere. Hey, it's this character, this is their backstory, and it's not a setup, it's not, you know, there's no clues for you to follow, like, oh, this happened earlier and that's a clue for that. And in turn, because they changed it at the end, but they didn't change it everywhere else, it gets mixed-matched, you know, and it would be fine if there were no clues if it was the dark figure coming out of the shadows that you didn't know, but the fact that it is someone means that you have to have, earlier on, some setup for it to be that someone, you know? So that's not the best. And like I talked about earlier, it's not the scariest thing. You know, it's a lot of the New York fashion world, and, you know, I guess it kind of is where you have to pretend like everything's normal and you have to act like you're in this world when you know there's the killer on the loose. But like when she's doing fashion photography, it can actually be kind of goofy and a little out there, and these scenes don't really feel scary, you know. They're playing Shake Your Booty at one point, and it's like, okay, that's kind of hard for that song to be in a horror movie unless it's used ironically. So it's not too scary outside of the kill scenes or the chase scenes, and those aren't, you know, all over the place. You know, they're a little spread out, and the kills are usually just the camera running up at someone, and every now and then we'll see the knife, actually the knife shot, kind of, you know, from Halloween, which is also from Psycho, is kind of mimicked here, you know, the whole camera going up like that. So yeah, there's some, you know, the person getting stabbed, falling down the stairs, but the kills aren't super memorable. But like I said earlier, this was pre, you know, when slashers would officially become slashers, you know, with Halloween, which would also be Carpenter, and then you get Friday the 13th after that, which really said, hey guys, let's focus on kills. So I can't really fault a movie for not being something that hadn't really been around yet, but at the same time, not super memorable, and also a bit of the rules where, you know, she says she can't see out of her eyes, but she sees out of the killer's eyes. It's never super established why this is, you know, and if the killer had been just anybody, then the reason for that could be, oh, it's just anything, but, you know, you kind of wonder why. Yeah, I don't know, maybe the obsession of the killer made it happen, but also, she's not supposed to see out of her eyes, yet she runs around pretty good, you know. You should be, like, tripping and falling over yourself. At one point, she gets a vision when she's driving, and she has much better control of the car than you think. You know, if you get a vision while driving, slow down and pull over. She gets the car a fair bit away, but at the same time, I'm like, you would not be able to drive that far if you couldn't see. Pretty much straight crash, probably into someone's bumper, but maybe she can see a little bit and just didn't let that on when she was explaining it, because she runs around pretty good for someone who shouldn't be able to see through her eyes. I don't know. But anyway, it's got a hook. And it's got interesting and unique elements, you know. Brad Dourif, young Tommy Lee Jones, and Faye Dunaway is a good lead. And, you know, the mystery and the concept, you know, especially this being one of the earlier Psychic Link movies, there really is a lot to keep you hooked, and there is some interesting stuff, but overall, it, you know, goes on a little longer than it should. There's more spaces between the kills, and it's not really that big of a horror movie, because, you know, it doesn't really focus on the deaths, but it's also not really that big of a mystery movie, because the mystery was just kind of thrown in at the last minute, and we do get to see kind of a Carpenter without Carpenter. Here's his idea, and him taken out of it, you know, and you kind of have to go, I wonder what Carpenter would have done. But at the same time, if he had done this, we probably wouldn't have got Halloween, so I would be interested to see it, but not at the cost of Halloween, you know, so that is what that is. But anyway, it's a fun movie. Just not a great movie, you know? Worth checking out if you haven't seen it. Anyway, to everyone who's watched so far, thank you for watching. To everyone who's liked and subscribed, thank you. You're really helping the channel out. I'll put a relevant playlist on the bottom. should probably be my John Carpenter playlist if you want to see me talk about other John Carpenter movies. Anyway, have a good day. I'll see you guys again very, very soon. Relevant playlist on the bottom. Have a good day now.